Part 4, Section 20. Lua's schemes go astray. It wasn't always possible for Lua to follow Abdu'l-Baha everywhere he travelled, but she did her best. In fact, one of Lua's greatest joys was thinking up new ways by which she could be with Abdu'l-Baha in his journeys throughout America. She longed to be in his presence at all times. This took a great deal of scheming on her part. Abdu'l-Baha was well aware of Lua's love-inspired little plots. Once in Haifa, as she was preparing to leave him, Abdu'l-Baha is reported to have said laughingly, "Will you begin to scheme to find a way to return here as soon as you reach America?" "No, beloved master," Lua answered honestly. "I shall begin scheming as soon as I'm on the boat." Abdu'l-Baha spent the months of June and July in New York. These were days of delight for Lua. Late in June, however, Abdu'l-Baha called Lua to him and broke the news that he wanted her to go to California to do some teaching work for the faith. Lua was frantic. She didn't want to leave him. She was so eager to be with him, she would frequently forget the lesson of patience which he was trying to teach her. Lua went to see her dear friend Juliet Thompson, her fellow conspirator in these attempts to be near the master. Lua explained another of her schemes. She knew that Abdu'l-Baha had asked Juliet to paint a portrait of her. Since this was a portrait which Abdu'l-Baha had himself requested, it was a wonderful indication of the great love he had for Lua. Lua's plot revolved around this painting. "Julia," she said, "the master has told you to paint my portrait. Please, dear, tell him that you can't paint my portrait if I'm in California." "He knows that." "But if you remind him, perhaps he'll think it's more important for me to be here with him." "The important thing," Juliet said, "is to be obedient to the master." "I am obedient to the master. I'm going to California, but a little later on when I can't possibly be with Abdu'l-Baha." "Lua, please." It was impossible for Juliet to refuse Lua when she was so persuasive. So Juliet went to the master. She told Abdu'l-Baha that she couldn't paint Lua's portrait if Lua were far off in California. The master laughed heartily and told her to tell Lua that she would be back in New York again in a year and that her portrait could be painted then. His final instructions were, tell Lua to go to California. Juliet delivered this message. Lua sighed and accepted the inevitable. But she didn't go to California immediately because Abdu'l-Baha was leaving the next day for Montclair, New Jersey, and Lua wanted to go there instead. For just this one last time. After all, New Jersey was west of New York and was on the way towards California. "Come on, Julia," Lua urged. "Let's go to Montclair to see Abdu'l-Baha." Juliet was shocked. "But we can't do that, Lua," she told her friend. "We haven't been invited. Besides, you have to go to California." "But we have a perfect excuse," Lua insisted. "You have all the proofs of those recent photographs which were taken of Abdu'l-Baha. He should see them so that he can approve of them." "Do you really think so?" Juliet asked. She was beginning to weaken herself. Lua was very persuasive. "Of course, dear," Lua assured her, and off they went to Montclair together. The master looked at the photographs, but he didn't look at Lua. Part 4, Section 21. The faith is established in America. Lua began to think that Abdu'l-Baha would never look at her again, at least not until she went to California. Still, she wouldn't be Lua if she failed to make one last gallant attempt to remain in the East with her beloved master. Lua was obedient to the master in all things except this longing desire never to leave him during his visit to America. The Persian Baha'is in Abdu'l-Baha's party were displeased with Lua because she didn't leave immediately for California. To them, such a delay was unthinkable. Abdu'l-Baha, with his sin-covering eye, must often have been distressed by the lack of response even on the part of those who loved him to arise and teach. "If the friends of God listen to my first word," he said, "they will find the success of this world and of the next world therein. But there are some who prefer their own thoughts above mine, and when they fall, they beg me to save them. Progress and prosperity are in the first word. For example, should I say to so-and-so, 'Go thou to America,' and should he reply, 'I beg to remain a few more days,' I give him permission to do as he wishes. But this is not my thought, this is his thought." Abdu'l-Baha, however, did not give Lua permission to stay. He insisted on her leaving for California. It was a match of wits and love, and Lua, of course, knew from the very first that her beloved master would win. She was only too well aware of her shortcomings, as, on that occasion, were many of her fellow Baha'is. They were annoyed, and some were very put out with her. Abdu'l-Baha was tender and patient, perhaps because Lua had arisen to teach. She had gone to America at the master's bidding, although with plaintive reluctance. She had travelled from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean. She had addressed a huge meeting in San Diego on the deck of the United States battleship California, the flagship of the fleet. She had encouraged a fellow Baha'i and helped to inspire him to open up an entire continent. She had inspired another believer to offer a gift of land, which became one of the first Baha'i schools in America. She had set ablaze another precious soul who opened up still another continent to the faith. Her spiritual children were enlisting in the radiant army of Baha'u'llah on every side. They were among the staunchest and most devoted soldiers of the Covenant. No doubt this dedication outweighed her human frailties and captured the Master's heart. It was reminiscent of the story of Mary, who so loved Christ that she anointed his precious feet with a whole pound of very costly ointment. It displeased some of his followers, especially Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him, objected, saying it should be sold and the money given to the poor. Christ replied that Mary had saved this gift of love because he would soon leave them. "For the poor always ye have with you, but me ye have not always." It is always more important to please God than to please one's fellow believers. Abdu'l-Baha's next visit was to Teaneck, New Jersey, to a property that became known in Baha'i history as Evergreen Cabin. Abdu'l-Baha invited all the Baha'is to join him in a large unity feast. This event has been commemorated every year since, even to the current day, as one of the happiest of Baha'i occasions and the single official annual commemoration of his visit. Yes, Abdu'l-Baha also invited Lua. She was delighted, but to her chagrin she soon realised that, immediately the feast was over, Abdu'l-Baha still expected her to leave for California. Lua was lost in the wonder of his presence on that history-making occasion. During that unity feast held on the 29th of June 1912, Abdu'l-Baha made it plain that the faith of Baha'u'llah had, on that day, truly been established in America. We can share through Lua's eyes the excitement that stirred each of those American Baha'is who heard Abdu'l-Baha's voice that day. We can see him yet, standing amidst the tall dark pines on that emerald green lawn. The scent of the pine and the soft needles beneath the trees, the fragrant air and blue skies made it a heavenly day. So many were the flowers which his loved ones had brought that they overflowed onto the grass, and it appeared as though the very earth beneath his feet had been embroidered into a multicoloured green carpet. This assembly, Abdu'l-Baha told them on that unforgettable day, has a name and significance which will last forever. Hundreds of thousands of meetings shall be held to commemorate this occasion, and the very words I speak to you today shall be repeated in them for ages to come. Therefore be ye rejoiced, for ye are sheltered beneath the providence of God. Be happy and joyous, because the bestowals of God are intended for you, and the life of the Holy Spirit is breathing upon you. For you are the ones who are called to uplift the cause of unity among the nations of the earth. Many of the seeds sown that day were to blossom in a later age. Many of those listening were to arise and become lions of the covenant of Baha'u'llah. Certainly, Lua was among them. When the Unity Feast was over, Lua discovered that she had a bad case of poison ivy. She was overjoyed. The distress and swelling were such as to incapacitate her, especially for long-distance travel. She immediately notified her friend Juliet about her delightful affliction. Miss Thompson came at once to Lua's hotel room. Juliet took one look at Lua's swollen ankles and said, "It is a punishment." "No, it's a reward," Juliet insisted. "It's a test." Lua said, "It's guidance." Juliet was not convinced. "Please, Julie," Lua begged, "go to the master and tell him my feet are all swollen up with poison ivy, that I can't even walk, so I can't possibly leave for California until the poison ivy is gone." Reluctantly, Juliet carried the message. The master laughed again. "I will cure Lua," he said. On the table nearby was a pot of cold tea. Abdu'l-Baha pointed to it. "Give Lua a drink from this pot of tea," he said. Juliet returned to Lua with the tea. Lua was obedient and drank it to the last drop. In the late afternoon, the master came to visit her. "Now," he said, laughing, "you are well, Lua. You can leave for California." With a mischievous twinkle, he added, "I cured you with a cup of cold tea." After Abdu'l-Baha was gone, Juliet rose from her chair, picked up Lua's empty teacup, and standing where the master had stood, looked first into the teacup and then at Lua. With the same mischievous twinkle that had lighted Abdu'l-Baha's eyes, Juliet said, "I see by the tea leaves in your cup that you are going on a long journey." One account of this incident reported that Abdu'l-Baha sent Lua an apple and a pomegranate to eat, and that she gravely, steadily, and thoroughly chewed them down to the last morsel, swallowing her cure in which lay the seeds of her own defeat. Another declared that it was an apple and a glass of pomegranate juice. Lua's sister, who had heard Lua laugh over the story many times, insisted that it was a cup of cold tea. Perhaps it was all three. One thing is certain, and all agree Lua was cured and couldn't think of another reason for not going to California. She had been cured both outwardly and inwardly, and to her intense delight, the journey turned out to be a blessing. Abdu'l-Baha had sent her on ahead to prepare the way. Soon he and his party joined her in California.